And hello, everybody. How's everybody doing? Did you all have a good week?
Yes, thanks.
Marion, how was your week?
Good. Well, I got off the phone this morning and called Nefesh B'Nefesh to reopen my Aliyah application.
Wow.
Going to get that all in the works again. So I am very excited and getting all the pieces together. Probably a time frame is about a year, realistically, because we've got a house to sell in South Carolina. This house to sell after we get back from spending about a month or two there, but we got a lot to do between here and there.
Sure. Well, when we made Aliyah, we decided in April to start thinking about it. In June, we made our application and we came on our pilot trip. We had never been to Israel before. Mm-hmm. We spent 1 week here. When we got back to America, our application through the Jewish agency had been approved. And we made Allianz in December, 6 months.
Wow. Well, yeah. I'd love to do it sooner. I said we really don't want to get too far ahead till we get that house sold in South Carolina.
So our house, we thought that we would be able to sell it in 6 months, and we weren't, because at that time it was right at the time when the real estate had been going up, and then the bubble burst. And so I think the house actually sold 5 days after we left the country. So what happened was we ended up having my sister be our power of attorney. Yeah. Power of attorney. And so she actually signed the contract and then deposited the money in our bank account for us. But it was a little crazy. It was a little nuts. Okay. And Hannah, how are you doing? We didn't talk much in the other class.
I'm good. It was a crazy week for me too.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Hanging in there.
Okay. That's good. Now tell everybody, where are you again?
I am in Boca Raton,
Florida. I thought so. So you're not experiencing weather like anybody else is experiencing. Although Boca, I mean, my understanding was past week has been unseasonably cold for Florida, right?
Yeah, it was pretty chilly. One morning it was like 48 degrees, which was pretty cold, and people had their ugly sweaters. I was like, that's a little much, but...
Hey, I wear my wool coat when it's in the 40s.
Yeah.
But again, I'm a Miami girl, so, it's like winters in Israel are actually very hard for me because it's wet and cold. But I mean, it's not super cold, but it's cold enough that it feels very cold.
Yeah.
So, okay. All right. So, and Hannah has arrived. Hello, Hannah.
Hello. Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing good. Thank you.
Good.
All right. We were just chatting a little bit, and now we're going to actually get started. So I like to start the group with just talking a little bit about the Parsha, just to get us thinking about the Parsha for you. The Parsha this week is Shemot. We're starting the new book. We're starting the book of Exodus. And the Parsha opens by saying, these are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt. Now, somebody had brought up in the Facebook group that, what's the difference between the usage of the word Jacob and Israel? And it's interesting to note that here it says Israel and not Jacob, even though we read in last week's Parsha, next to the last chapter, right at the end of Bereshit in 49, it says, when Jacob finished charging his sons, he drew his feet into his bed and breathed his last and was gathered to his people. So he wasn't called Israel at that point, even though his name had been changed many years before. The Torah calls him Jacob. But then it starts this Parsha by saying the sons of Israel who came to Egypt. So anyone who spent any time reading the Tanakh knows that the Jewish people are variously referred to both as Israel and as Jacob. And so the question was asked, why? What's the difference? Well, there's a lot of disagreement, as is usual in everything Jewish, right? Nobody ever agrees on the reason for anything. But there's a lot of disagreement as to if there's a common thread when it refers to Jacob and when it refers to Israel. And some commentators have said there is a common thread, and other commentators have said no, because every thread that everybody tries to put together, there's always one place or a few places that disprove whatever the theory is. All right. And so I actually have a theory that I'm going to share with you guys. But we know that Jacob struggled with an angel, right? Jacob struggled with the angel, and the angel changed his name from Jacob to Israel. Even though he wasn't called Israel until a little bit later, when God kind of reconfirmed that change. All right. But it is Jacob who struggled and Israel who overcame. All right. Jacob who struggled and Israel who overcame. So when the Tanakh, this is just Penina's theory, when the Tanakh refers to the Jewish people as Jacob, I believe that it's referring to us in the physical sense, in the nation made up of individuals, the people sense, as the nation that struggles in this world, that struggles for her identity, that struggles to survive, that struggles to make a way in a world that's oppositional to the way that God has prescribed for her, okay? That when it's referring to Jacob, it's a much more physical, natural reference, and may also be related. I talk a lot about the fact that the Tanakh, throughout the Tanakh, the Jewish people are referred to in both plural and singular, sometimes in the same sentence, right? And that's because we have two separate frameworks for our relationship with God. One is as an individual, and the other is as part of the group, the nation, the klal, as we say in Hebrew. And I feel that the reference to the Jewish people as the stars in the sky and the sand in the sea actually demonstrate this. For example, if you have sand on the seashore, right? One grain of sand. What is one grain of sand? A grain of sand is like a grain of salt. It's like nothing. It's not even a pebble. It's very tiny. If you had a grain of sand, one grain of sand in your shoe, you wouldn't notice it. By itself, it is nothing. But put together with millions of other grains of sand, now it can do something. It can produce something. You know, it's used to tell time. It can be used to make artwork, right? You take enough grains of sand and put it under enough heat, and it can be turned into glass. And then, I mean, the invention of glass absolutely revolutionized the world, right? Before there was glass, if your vision wasn't great, too bad. Before there was glass, there were no microscopes or telescopes for us to see the world beyond what's right in front of our faces. Before there was glass, people lived in darkness part of the year because they had to keep their windows, they had to keep their shutters closed to keep the bad weather out of their homes, right? They couldn't even have light except for what was on the fire. And the invention of glass meant that people could then have windows where, even though it was inclement weather outside, they would be able to have light coming in. So between glasses and telescopes and microscopes and windows, glass revolutionized the world. And the Jewish people are like that. That is what we call the klal. As a nation, right? As an individual, in reference to the nation, one disappears. But as a nation, put us together, put us under a little bit of heat, and we can revolutionize the world. And we have changed the world in many ways. The stars, the reference to the Jewish people as the stars, is referring to the individual Jewish person. Because when you have a whole blanket of stars in the sky, the individual stars disappear in a way. they lose their beauty. But if you can take a telescope and look at just one star, if you take it just by itself, it has its own unique twinkle, it has its own unique color. It is beautiful by itself. But in the whole sky, in the greater context, it can disappear. Right? So I feel that this reference to the Jewish people, and there are other references that kind of agree with this concept that we're individuals, but we're also part of the klal, part of the group. And that's why sometimes the Torah refers to us in the singular, and sometimes the Torah refers to us, or the Tanakh refers to us in the plural. And I believe that the usage of Jacob and Israel is a similar parallel. Jacob is referring to the individuals that make up the nation. It's referring to the physical. It's referring to the struggle that we have in this world with other people. And Israel refers to the klal. It refers to the nation, but it also refers to our spiritual existence in this world and in the universe. Right. So, like I said, Jacob struggled. Israel overcame. Okay. So the Parsha opens up calling us the sons of Israel, because at that point we were a nation, a people, and we had become fruitful and we had multiplied. And then it says that a new king arose over Egypt who didn't know about Joseph. Now, just to take a little excursion here, I think to myself, like, wow, what a short memory, right? I mean, think about it. Even if it had been 100 years since the famine, that's not such a long time for a major cataclysmic event. But nonetheless, they forgot. Now, think about it. In 2001, which is 16 years ago, there was a pretty major event that happened in the United States on September 11th, right? But how many people actually think about it today? I mean, right? Unless you directly lost a loved one, you probably barely notice when September 11th rolls around. You know, they have memorials and different things like that. But imagine in 100 years, when everyone who was around is then dead, do you think that there's still going to be 9/11 memorial services? Probably not. They probably won't still be reading off the names of those who died. It will be something that maybe you accidentally come across while following a Wikipedia rabbit trail, right? You know, like, oh, yeah, that's right. I remember learning this in history on September 11th. This happened, right? So the children of Israel became numerous. The Egyptians forgot about all that Jacob had done for them. They became afraid of us as a nation. They were afraid that we were so numerous that if one of their enemies befriended us, we would join forces with them and we would fight them and we would win, defeat them. And so they decided that what they needed to do was enslave us as a people to destroy our identity as a people, our self-worth, and our value of ourselves. All right. So the children of Israel became numerous, and the Egyptians became afraid of them and enslaved the children of Israel. Now, if we're going back to my theory, right, enslavement is a physical situation. So why does it refer here to us as the children of Israel and not as Jacob? Because the enslavement was not of individuals. It was of the nation. It was a way to suppress the spiritual power of the nation of Israel. And although it used a physical means, it was really a spiritual act, if you will. Okay, so that is kind of the thought that I had on this idea of Israel versus Jacob. There were several other things that jumped out at me, but two that I wanted to mention to you. I once did a study on the questions that God asks in the Tanakh. And it wasn't a complete study because I kind of lost track of my project. I do that a lot. I start stuff and then don't finish it. But here in the Parsha this week, Moses is, Moses is born, right? In this Parsha, Moses is born, and his mother puts him in a basket in the sea. Pharaoh's daughter finds him, adopts him, but he's raised by his real mother. So ostensibly he knows that he's a Jew, right? I can't imagine the conflict that he had going on inside of him. And then one day he sees an Egyptian and a Jew fighting, and he ends up killing the Egyptian, and then he sees two Jews fighting, and all right. So at this point, he's now wanted by Pharaoh because he killed someone, and so he runs away to the land of Midian, where he rescues these daughters of Jethro, and he ends up staying with him. He ends up marrying his daughter Zipporah, and they end up having a child. And all of this is in this week's Parsha. And during this time is when Moses discovers the burning bush, right? So God speaks to him through the burning bush, and God tells him that he's going to use him to rescue the Jewish people from the enslavement of the Egyptians. But Moses is actually quite a humble person and also lacking in self-confidence. And he's like, how am I supposed to do this? And God asks Moses, what's in your hand? Right? Now, God doesn't need to know what's in Moses' hand. God knows what's in Moses' hand. God's God, and he's talking to Moses. But Moses needs to know what's in Moses' hand. Because the idea is that, by the way, it's a staff, right? So God tells Moses to throw down the staff. He throws down the staff and it turns into a snake. Then God tells Moses to pick it up by the tail and it turns back into a staff. The idea here that we can take away from that little passage, from this question that God asks, because anytime that God or an angel asks a question, there's something that we can take away from it. And in this case, what we can take away from it is that you are never without resources. God has given you a lot of tools for you to be able to use to do the job that you were given in this world, right? Sometimes, though, we have to be reminded that we've got something in our hand, right? Sometimes we feel empty-handed, and yet God says, what's that? What's that right there? You know, what's with your ability to speak, or your ability to teach, or your ability to sing, or your ability to whatever? It's a resource that you've been given to be able to do what you were called to do in this world. So now use it. Okay? And anybody who is willing to use that resource, to submit that resource to God, he can basically create magic in your hands. Just give it over to him and God will use it for your good. All right? So that's the one message that I wanted to get out of it. And then the other one, and this is especially important for those of us who came out of Christianity, is in Exodus chapter 4, verse 22, God tells Moshe to tell Pharaoh, "So said the Lord, my firstborn son is Israel." Now, why did God tell Moses to tell Pharaoh his firstborn son is Israel? Well, I think that there's two reasons. One is, in the Egyptian religion, Pharaoh was God, but the firstborn son is going to be God, a God. He's his heir, and he was worshipped as a god by the people. And the Pharaoh would do anything to protect his son. So he was sending the message to Pharaoh that Israel, the nation, is very important to God. It's his firstborn son. It's going to be like God to the world, right? But I think there's a secondary message there, and that is that, not everything that Moshe said to Pharaoh was written down. So this must be significant if it was written down. And I think that it was written down so that in the future, many thousands of years in the future, when a New Testament came along and said that someone else was God's only begotten son, we would be able to say, wait a minute, no. God said thousands of years ago that Israel was his firstborn son, all right? And it's there for a reason to remind us of this, okay? So that is what I wanted to share with you from the Parsha this week. Before I move on, we're going to look at, we're going to start to look at the morning blessings. But before I do that, I was just wondering if there are any comments. All right, meditations on the morning bracha. Now, I put together the slideshow a long time ago because I did a series on prayer, and I started with the morning blessings. It says in Tehillim, which is Psalms 69, verse 13, "But as for me, my prayer is to you, O Lord, at an acceptable time, O God, in the greatness of your loving kindness, answer me with your saving truth." All right. So what is prayer? Right? That's what we need to start with. What is prayer? Within Judaism, there are two different types of prayer: the formal, ordered prayers that we do from the siddur, and the private, personal prayer. And we talked a little bit about this last week, that there are many opinions about the nature of the ordered prayers and the level of our obligation to perform them. It's a rabbinic obligation to participate in corporate prayer. But there's a debate between Maimonides, Rambam, and Nachmanides, Ramban, as to whether or not personal private prayer is an obligation specified in the Torah or not, right? During this class, when we refer to prayer, we're not going to be talking nearly so much about this corporate organized prayer from the siddur, even though we are. We're going to be talking about a lot about personal prayer. It was interesting. I think it was it from last week's Parsha? My husband shared something at the table about a reference to, when Jacob was giving the inheritance to Ephraim and Manasseh, he said that the portion that he was giving to them, he had won with a sword and with an arrow. And the question is raised, why did he mention these? First of all, it's not mentioned anywhere in the Torah about a battle that he did, that he won this portion that he was giving to Ephraim and Manasseh. But why the mention of the sword and the arrow? And the explanation that was given over was that the sword is like the prayers from the siddur. A sword is sharp. A sword will hurt somebody regardless of the skill of the person wielding it. In fact, the person wielding it can hurt themselves if they're not careful, right? It's sharp. If you walk past an unsheathed sword, you could get cut, even if nobody's wielding it, right? It is sharp and powerful and a weapon on its own, regardless of the skill of the user. And the reason that he compares the sword to the prayers from the siddur is that there is something inherent in the words themselves that are powerful and that will accomplish something in the heavenly realm, regardless of whether you even know what you're saying. Now, obviously, the goal is to be able to understand what you're saying, because how else could it be a jumping off point for personal prayer if you don't even know what you're saying? But the words themselves in the Hebrew are like that sword, that they are powerful in and of themselves. Hebrew, as you know, is the only language in the entire world that God himself created. All right? God spoke to Adam in some language, and it's believed that it was Hebrew. So the arrow, he is compared to personal prayer. Okay, it has a sharp tip, but it's not going to do any damage unless the person who is wielding it has some skill, knows what they're doing. And in that way, whereas you don't have to have kavanah, you don't have to have a lot of intention when you're praying from the sitter, in order for it to accomplish something. Personal prayer, you have to be engaged. You have to have your brain engaged. It requires mindfulness. It requires intention. And so it is compared to the arrow, which has to be shot with skill. But the two of them are both weapons that are both very important and both very valuable. Okay? All right. So Hashem, God, instructed Moses and the Jewish people to construct the tabernacle when they were wandering in the desert, right? The tabernacle, or Mishkan, and then later the temple, all right, or Beit HaMikdash. So this, why? He said he wanted them to construct it, not for sacrifices. I mean, sacrifices took place there, but because he wanted to dwell among us. It was a place for the presence of God to reside so that he could be close to us and that we could have a relationship with him. Everything boils down to the idea of having a relationship with God. Some Orthodox Jews balk at the idea of using this concept because it is so heavily talked about in Christian circles, the idea of a relationship with God. The thing is that Jews were understanding the concept of a relationship with God long before Christianity ever came to this world, right? It says there in Exodus, let them construct a sanctuary for me that I may dwell among them. God wanted to be close to us because he wanted to have a relationship with us. Okay? It says in Shemot 29, I will dwell among the sons of Israel, and I will be their God. They shall know that I am the Lord their God who brought them out of the land of Egypt, that I might dwell among them. I am the Lord their God. So he wanted to be close to us, like a man who marries a woman from a foreign country and then arranges to bring her back to her own country because he loves her, and he wants, to his country because he loves her and he wants her to be with him. God too brought us out of a foreign country with the express purpose of wanting to be close to us, to relate to us. He wants to have a relationship with us. Can you imagine a marriage where the couple never talk to each other or never communicate with each other? What kind of a relationship would that be? Mm-hmm. So prayer is an important part of having a relationship. Now, the story is told of the son of the Maggid of Mezerich. This was a famous, you'll hear about him all the time. He was a famous Jewish storyteller who burst into his father's study crying. He had been playing hide and seek, and he had found a great hiding place. And he waited, but no one came to seek him. His friends had given up on finding him, and they went on to other games. And the kid is still sitting there hiding, right? So the father, the Maggid, tearfully responded, Hashem also plays hide and seek with us, so that we should seek and reveal heaven within earth. The concealment is so thorough that people sometimes forget to look for him. How sad it must be for the one who hides. Now, the funny thing is that even though the child tried to find the best hiding place, like think about it, when you play hide and seek, right? You want to find a really good hiding place. You want to find a place that is going to take them a long time to find you, but your goal is still to be found. It's just not to be found first, right? You want to be found. You just don't want to be found first. You don't want people to give up looking for you, right? And God is that same way. He hides himself from us, but still the ultimate goal is to be found. He wants us to come after him and to find him. And sometimes that's very hard when we look and it seems like he's hiding very well. It's easy for us to give up. But like a game of hide and seek, if you were playing with 5 friends and you found 4 of them, you all work together to try to find the fifth one, right? Even though he's not going to be it, because the first person found is the next it. But everybody goes and they look for him because they know that he's still out there somewhere. And so God is telling us, I'm still here. Don't give up on finding me. Even though it's really hard for you to find me, I'm still here. Keep looking. All right? Okay. Modeh Ani is one of the most ancient Jewish prayers, right? It is the first thing that a Jewish person says when they open their eyes in the morning, or at least it's supposed to be. What we're going to do over the next couple of weeks is break down the meaning of this prayer, and then we'll move on to other prayers we recite in the morning, and, etc. We'll talk about other things during the interactive period of our class. But the goal is to understand each prayer so that we can focus on its meaning, so that it'll have meaning to us, and that we can transform the prescribed prayers into personal prayers that draw us closer to God. Okay, so what we're doing is we're taking the prescribed prayers and we're using it as a stepping off point to personal prayer, but we're also transforming it into something that's very meaningful to us, so that we're not just using the sword, we're also using the arrow. All right, so here is, and I can send you a copy of this. I can actually send you a copy of this with the English translation so that you can print it off if you like. But the Modeh Ani says, Modeh Ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam shehechazarta bi nishmati bechemla rabba emunatecha. And there's a few different tunes that people sing, to sing it. I'm trying to think. I don't know if I want to sing for you or not. I have a stuffy nose and I'm not sure how it'll sound, but I could try. Let's see. One of them goes, Modeh Ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam shehechazarta bi nishmati bechemla rabba emunatecha. So that's one of the tunes. And then the other one goes, Modeh Ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam shehechazarta bi nishmati bechemla rabba emunatecha. Both of those tunes lead into the next prayer, but there's some significant things about this prayer that I want you to notice. First thing is that it doesn't say God's name anywhere, right? You don't see God's name anywhere in this prayer. And it would make you feel like, okay, it's not even really a prayer, but it is a prayer. It is to God, but it doesn't say God's name. And that means that you can say it while you're in bed, half naked, doesn't matter. Like, it's not disrespectful to God because you're not saying his name. So it can be the first thing that you say when you wake up. All right. So that means also that you can say it more than once. So, for example, I'll say it first thing in the morning, but then it's also in my sitter. So I usually end up saying it a second time when I say my morning blessings, unless I remember not to, and then I don't. But so that's the first thing about Modeh Ani. Okay. So Modeh Ani, which is the first two words of the prayer, is usually translated as I give thanks. Okay? The proper way to say it, by the way, if you are female, is not Modeh Ani. Modeh Ani is masculine, although I have it printed here without any vowels, so it wouldn't look any different. But for a woman, we should say Modah Ani instead of Modeh Ani. Modeh is masculine, Modah is feminine. It doesn't really matter. God knows who you are. But just so you know that that's actually the correct way to say it. If you're a woman, to say Modeh Ani, and it means, it's usually translated again, as I said, I give thanks. But in a second, we're going to take a look at what it actually means. Okay. Modeh itself is one of those words which is very difficult to translate from Hebrew into English. Rather than being simply a word, it's really more of a concept. There's no English words that suffice to communicate the depth of this concept. All right. Before we move on, there are 4 types of prayer, okay? Christians also have this concept. I use the Hebrew words here, tehillah, teshuvah, todah, and tefillah. So tehillah being praise, teshuvah being repentance, todah being thanksgiving, and tefillah being supplication. All right? All right, so why start with thanksgiving, with todah? Modeh means so much more than just thanks. It actually means to surrender or to admit or to acknowledge. Like when 2 people have a disagreement and the first person brings his arguments and his proofs, and finally the second person has to acknowledge that the first person was correct. This act of admission and surrender is modeh. The second person says, I am modeh to you. You're right. You've proven yourself to be right. And I am acknowledging that I am acknowledging this. Okay. So, hang on. I lost my page. There we go. Think about this for a minute. Judaism never asks us to have blind faith. Okay. Faith is trust that includes an element of unsurety, right? I usually compare it to sitting in a chair. There comes a point at which you just have to trust that the chair is going to catch your weight, right? You have to let go. You know, there's a moment where your weight is on your legs, and then as you lower yourself into the chair, you switch from the weight being in your legs to the weight being in the chair. There's that moment of unsurety. You know, you don't know for sure if the chair is going to actually hold you or not. I mean, you believe it will because you have a history with chairs, and you know that usually chairs will catch you. And it's that way with our relationship with Hashem. Faith is trust, but it includes, and it's based on a track record. That's why we say that Judaism does not ask for blind faith, but it still includes that unsurety. It involves believing in something, that something is going to be the case, something unseen, but only because reason has been given to support that belief. So if I ask my husband to do something that seems a little crazy to him, I might say to him, listen, please just trust me on this, okay? There's a 99% chance he's going to go along with it, even if he's skeptical, because we've been married for many years, and he knows me, and he loves me, and he knows that I'm trustworthy. So I've shown him over the years that he can trust me, and so he does. God doesn't ask us to believe in something for which we have no evidence. He's given us proof, not only that he exists, but that he loves us and he's actively involved in our lives. So when we open our eyes in the morning, the first thing we do before anything else is we acknowledge that God is in charge. The fact that we have woken up to live yet another day is in some regards is all the proof that we need. Now, this prayer, Modeh Ani, like I said, was constructed without the use of God's name so that we can say it in whatever state we find ourselves. It's almost like, like if I decided that I really didn't like the way I looked today, I might turn off the video camera, right? And just do audio. Right? So not having Hashem's name is kind of like that. It's kind of like making a phone call instead of a video, right? How many times have you answered the phone and been glad that you weren't, that it wasn't a video call? There was this morning, somebody tried to do a call. There was a Skype call or something, and it said you were receiving a video call, and I was like, no, not doing that. It's early in the morning, and I'm not dressed. I'm not doing that. So anyway, this is especially convenient when we need to take care of urgent business, right? Or have something clarified before we carry on with the rest of the day. Oh, I was saying, sorry, I can call my mom or something else. I don't have to be dressed because there's no camera. All right, in the same way, we can approach God first thing in the morning to express our acknowledgement and gratefulness to God before we're even ready to start our day, to put everything in perspective right up front. We're going to make a declaration of acknowledgement, right? So that's what this is. Now, the word modeh is also related to the word hoda'ah. Hoda'ah means awe. So we say modeh ani in the morning. We're saying, I acknowledge you, but we're also saying, I am in awe of the incredible gift that you have given me as a person made in your image, which is something we'll get into a little bit later in the morning brachas, okay? Now, just another note. The word for Jew, which in Hebrew is Yehudi, is from the same root as Hoda'ah and Modeh. How incredible it is that the very first word on our lips in the morning is the same word that defines who we are as Jews. We are thankful, we are in awe, but more than that, we surrender to God's incredible power and might and acknowledge that He is in charge of everything. And that is really the essence of what it means to be a Jew. It means to be thankful to God, it means to be in awe of God, and it means to surrender to God's incredible power and might and acknowledge that He is in charge of everything. That, in its essence, is what it means to be a Jew. And that is why we say, Modeh ani. So, what does it mean when we say Modeh ani? There's a tremendous battle going on in our human existence. When we first wake up in the morning, the first awareness we have is I, right? Nothing more, really, just that I am here. That's all we are aware of at first. But then our brain engages and we begin to have more complex thoughts, and we begin to become aware of the world around us, a world that I did not create, but someone else did, right? God. And so we either focus on I or that someone else. That someone else is who we call God or Hashem, the one who is in control. Now, it's natural for a person to focus at that point on the I and to forget about God, right? Because that's like, we just wake up and it's like, I have to get up. Oh, I'm still tired. Oh, I need to go to the bathroom. Oh, whatever. And that's where our focus is. But it's the Yehudi, the Modeh within us that says, no, there's something greater out there, something higher than me. And so we take that first moment after we realize that we exist in the world for another day to acknowledge the existence and the awesomeness of God. And that is the Modeh. All right? So what is Ani? Ani is I. This is the I that must surrender. It's no coincidence that it is the second word in the prayer, in fact, rather than the first. Because if it were the first, our focus would be on I. But we don't need that as our focus, because that's already like that's what happens, right? That's the not common denominator, but that's the default, right? It is the I that is somehow bestowing something on Hashem. No, that doesn't make sense. So instead, it comes second after the acknowledgement that there is another. All right? So once we acknowledge, we say Modeh, because you could say Ani Modeh, I am grateful. But it doesn't. It says Modeh Ani, because first we have to acknowledge the Modeh, then we can say I. Because unlike other faiths, It's not that I don't exist. I do exist, and I'm important, but I'm not nearly as important as the one who created me and put me here on earth. Hang on. Okay. We use the word I all the time. But when we say I, who are we talking about? We think of it as being our very essence, right? Who am I? It's me. There are lots of things that people know me as. They know me as a wife, a daughter, a mother, a teacher, a public speaker, etc. But people know us as in many different ways. But when I talk about I'm referring to my essence. I'm referring to the deepest expression of who I am. So when we wake up in the morning and we say Moda Ani, even before we've had time to think about the day, about who we will be that day, from the very essence of our being, we're acknowledging that there is a God. He's the one who created us. He's the one who's in charge, and he's the one who gave us the life that we are just now beginning to experience again as we begin to regain our consciousness. Now, you didn't know I was going to give you any homework, but you're going to get homework today, okay? Your homework is this. If you are not already in the custom of saying Moda Ani in the morning, I want you to take a big piece of paper and write Moda Ani on the paper. Now, you can spell it out in English, just like I have on the transliteration there, Moda Ani. Write out Moda Ani, and I want you to tape it somewhere next to your bed, maybe on top of your alarm clock or something, but somewhere where you'll see it, and make it big enough that you can see it without your glasses on. Somewhere that you will see it. And first thing, and get in the habit of saying Moda Ani, just those two words. All right, we'll work on saying the whole thing later, but right now, just get in the habit of saying Moda Ani. I acknowledge you. I'm grateful to you. I'm in awe of you. All right, in awe of you am I. All right, Moda Ani. And I want you to do that every morning for the next week. If you're already in the habit of saying Moda Ani every day, I want you to stop. And as you say the first two words, think about the fact that you are in awe and that you are acknowledging God as creator and that he is in charge. So you also write Moda Ani on a piece of paper. And so you'll look at it and you'll go, oh, Moda Ani lefinecha melech chai v'kayim. Stop. Moda Ani. And think about being in awe and acknowledging God as the creator, that he is in charge and that it is his love for you that gave you the power to wake up this morning. And, obviously I want to know if it affects your day, how it changes your week. And, definitely give me some feedback and let me know. All right, so now let's open up the microphones. If anybody wants to say anything, have a comment, a question, let's have some discussion if there is.
I had read a very interesting study that someone did about when you wake up in the morning and you go from lying in bed to standing up, in order for you not to get dizzy or to stand up without feeling faint, that you should sit at the side of your bed for so many seconds. And some rabbi had commented, if you count the amount of time that it says to take Moda Ani, it's the amount of time that you should pause from the time you wake up and say, sit at the side of your bed to get up. So it was kind of the comment that in funny ways, science sometimes supports some of these practices that we have had, and why physiologically it's a very healthy thing to do too.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was an interesting tidbit.
Yeah. Wow. That's very cool. Well, it's just like this whole thing with, I did in the Navigating Judaism class, we talked about 40 days because it came up having to do with there being 40 days from Rosh Chodesh Elul to the end of Yom Kippur, okay? So 40 being a very significant number in Judaism and in Jewish practice. And of course, there are lots of scientific studies that say that it takes 40 days to change the way that you think to change a habit and stuff like that. So it's really fascinating to me how much of science actually supports Torah observant Judaism as being the healthiest way to live. I know that there are some who would say, you know, no to things or whatever, but really in the end, it really is very much supported. I mean, whether or not that was on purpose or it just worked out that way, I don't know, but I don't believe in coincidences. So I guess it was done. It was engineered that way, but thank you for that. Anybody else? Hannah.
Yes.
Yes.
I want to tell my story about Moda'ani.
Okay, cool.
I have said for many years that Judaism saved my life because I had a very bad upbringing. I was married for 25 years to an alcoholic, lots of codependency issues, lots of all kinds of really yuck stuff. And I kind of went from really, really depressed to suicidal, bounced back and forth most of my life until I started exploring Judaism. And the Shema, Moda'ani, some of the first things that I learned. Mm-hmm. And then I threw in Oseh Shalom to go with it eventually at the same time, because how do you stay suicidal? How do you stay depressed when you're waking up every day on purpose saying, "You're God, I'm not. Thank you," whether you mean it or not, that's still what the prayer is. Thank you for bringing me back to another day. And the one that can make peace in high places can make peace for me. Or wholeness, which is the root of shalom. And it totally, completely changed my outlook and changed my life.
Wow.
And saved my life.
Wow.
That's amazing.
That is an incredible, incredible, incredible testimonial. Wow. It's, powerful. Definitely.
It's very powerful. So I really love this homework assignment you've given. I'm really excited to hear what everybody comes back with.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I'm very excited as well. Okay. Anybody else? Yeah.
One more thing.
Yeah.
That was my phone call. I was trying to message you, and my phone decided it wanted to call you this morning.
Aha.
I didn't even know you could do that. And the phone just did it on its own. And then I couldn't figure out how to get it stopped. And I'm going, oh my gosh, I don't know what she's doing.
Yes, well, I was at a place where I was not answering the phone. No, not doing it. Sorry.
I appreciate that greatly.
Yeah, I would imagine so. You would have had another story to tell if I had answered it. That's great. Okay, so I can't remember. Did you join us early enough to hear my answer about Jacob versus Israel?
Yes, I did. Okay. I do have one question about that, though. Mm-hmm. At the end of this past Parsha, when he's blessing his sons, I think it's at the end of it. In one sentence it'll be Jacob, and one sentence it'll be Israel, and it's back and forth like that from one sentence to the next. So that's where my question really came from. Is like, okay, what makes the difference here? What is going on that I'm not getting because I don't know enough?
Right. So
I really appreciated what you were saying. I really liked that a lot. But I was wondering the minutia of that last thing there. What was the difference? What's being reflected as far as the blessings or whatever?
So I would go back and look at those. I just looked at the last comment about Jacob dying. I didn't go farther back in last week's Parsha. But my guess would be you either can see a difference in the spiritual versus the physical, or the point is that it's both. that God is trying to include both the spiritual and the physical in each verse, to say that there are different aspects of it, because we have that physicality, our physical features and character traits, but then we have a physical use for them and we have a spiritual use for them. So with that context, I would go back and read it again and see how that might apply.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Absolutely. I definitely feel like, because there's just so many things throughout the Tanakh that are clearly drawing this difference between the nation and the individual. So also I feel like the Jacob versus Israel is not only the individual versus the nation, but what is the individual is the physical makeup, and the nation is the spiritual entity called Israel. Because if there wasn't that spiritual aspect, we wouldn't be Israel. So I feel like that works very well with this whole theme that we see, this overarching thing between singular and plural, between stars and sand, and individual and national. All right, ladies, it is 11:30. So I'm going to sign off unless there's any more comments. Did anybody else have a comment?
I really find it difficult with personal prayer. I've got to the stage where I don't pray.
Okay.
Because it just seems like the opposite happens. And I know that God has a reason why my prayer is not answered. But I've got to the stage of just being so discouraged that I don't pray anymore. I find it really, really difficult.
Sure.
I want to start, and then I stop straight away, because it's because it's just I don't know how to overcome that.
So one of the things that I would recommend, it's available on video and it's available on audio. I did a talk on how to know God loves you, and if he loves you, then why do bad things happen? And I think that is intimately connected with this concept of feeling like your prayers aren't being answered. And so you can, the video is actually on nativ.org. So if you put nativ, NETIV.org, and then put like Penina Taylor, God loves you, or something like that, it should come up. And then if that doesn't work for you, the audio is on my website. So you go to PeninaTaylor.com, and then I think the name of it in there is A Match Made in Heaven. And so that's audio only. But it's a very important and meaningful talk. When I was on my first speaking tour in South Africa 8 years ago, or whatever it was, I was asked if I would come speak to a group of people who had a family member who had died of cancer. It was a support group for families of people who had either were going through cancer or had died of cancer. And I was kind of like, I don't know if I'm the best person to speak to these people, because I don't know that anything that I say would be of any comfort, but also I don't know what they're going through. I mean, I can imagine, but it's only an imagine. I mean, I don't know. And so this talk came to me, and I thought, okay, I'll give it, but I don't know if it's going to be a comfort, or if it's going to be more painful or upsetting or whatever. So I gave the talk, and afterwards, many of the people in the audience came to me and said that it was comforting and it was meaningful to them. So take a look at the video, watch it. I don't know that it'll solve all your problems or answer all your questions or make you suddenly want to start talking to God again, but it might be a start.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. And you know what? For Moda Ani, it doesn't take anything to say, okay, I'm acknowledging that I've been given another day. Okay? You're waking up in the morning, you're not even saying, thank you, God. Just say, Moda Ani. I'm acknowledging that I was given another day. I have something to do. There's some reason why I'm still here, and I'm acknowledging that. All right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anybody else?
Good night.
All right, ladies. Good
Bye.
night. Thank you so much. And I will see you online
you.
and see you next week.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take
Good night.
care.